I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, of mild and sweet the words repeat, of peace on earth, goodwill to men. I always grew up thinking that was a song we sung in church that someone had written as a hymn. Well, when I went to college and got all learned, I found out it was actually a poem written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow during the Civil War. But of course, we know that the idea of peace on earth, goodwill toward men didn't really come from him. That was something that the angels said to the shepherds on the first Christmas when they proclaimed the birth of a new baby. And they said, this baby will bring peace on earth, goodwill toward men. But even that proclamation wasn't the first time when God had given a message to us that said peace on earth, goodwill toward men, and linked that idea with the idea of the birth of a child. If we go way back, 800 years before the first Christmas, to another time when civil war had broken out, there were 4 kings involved. King Ahaz was the king of Judah. He ruled from Jerusalem. King Pekah was the king of Israel, the northern kingdom, which had broken off from Judah. King Peraz was the king of Syria, right next to Israel. And Tiglath-Pileser, that's right, Tiglath, not Piglet. Tiglath-Pileser was the king of Assyria, the world power of that day. And as Assyria began to spread its tentacles across the Middle East, every king was forced with a question of whether or not to give their loyalty to Assyria or to rise up and fight against Assyria. King Pekah of Israel and King Peraz of Syria decided to create a coalition to fight against Assyria and Tiglath-Pileser. But King Ahaz of Judah chose rather to put his allegiances with Assyria. And as a result, King Pekah and King Peraz came down to Jerusalem to lay siege to the city of Jerusalem, to God's people of Judah, and to King Ahaz. Now, I need to take a break because I got through all that and got all the names right, and that was not easy. I've been practicing that for 2 months. No, not really. But in the midst of this civil war between the northern kingdom of Israel and their allies and the southern kingdom of Judah, the prophet Isaiah came to Ahaz to give him encouragement and to comfort him, to tell him that they would not lose, that in fact, in only one generation, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Syria would be wiped out. And to do so, he gave him some prophecies that are very familiar. And if you read Isaiah 7 through 11, it's a wonderful reading this time of year because it's all about the birth of this child who is going to bring peace. But I want to read to you just from Isaiah chapter 9, where we see a prophecy of a child that is to come who will bring peace on earth and goodwill to men. Verse 2, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you, as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. The first part of this passage, Isaiah talks about the peace that is coming. That those who would bring war against Judah will be crushed and destroyed. That they'll be defeated completely. And then he says, and the reason is because a child is coming. A child who will be the deliverer. Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. And listen to the names of this baby. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. The child who will bring peace. Now some would argue that this was talking about someone that was going to be born in Isaiah's day, and it wasn't really talking about Jesus. But if I can just tell you how I really feel about that, that's hooey. Look at the beginning of this passage, chapter 9, verse 1. It says, "Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali." Now, I want you to picture up here a big map, okay? And up at the top of the map is the nation of Israel. And down here is the nation of Judah and Jerusalem. And remember, Israel is attacking Judah. And when we talk about the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, we're looking up at the top, up at Israel. This is the land that would later be known as the land of Galilee. And what Isaiah was saying was, look, for these regions up north, up here in Galilee, that's going to be devastated. These are your enemies right now, and Assyria is going to come in and completely destroy them. But I've got good news for them, because for these places, in the past, God humbled those lands, but listen, in the future, he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles. In fact, the people who are right now up there, who are walking in darkness, he says in verse 2, those people will see a great light. Now, who is that talking about? Honestly, nothing ever good happened in Galilee. In fact, if you remember, when Philip told his friend Nathanael about Jesus, he said, does anything good come out of that area? Well, look at this. In Matthew chapter 4, verse 12, Matthew's talking about the beginning of Jesus' ministry, and he actually quotes Isaiah. He says, when Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, he returned to Galilee. Leaving Nazareth, he went and lived in Capernaum, which was by the lake in the area of Zebulun and Naphtali, to fulfill what was said to the prophet Isaiah, land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali, the way to the sea along the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. And from that time on, Jesus began to preach, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. So what's happening? Isaiah is saying, look, the day is coming when a son will be born, the Prince of Peace, the person who will sit on David's throne and reign, and it will be a kingdom where peace will never end. And 800 years after Isaiah prophesied that, in a barn in Bethlehem, the child was born. And the child grew up, and he shone the great light in the land of Galilee, just like Isaiah said he would. And later on in Isaiah, he prophesied that same child would die, and he did. And Jesus' message the whole time he was on earth, was the kingdom of heaven is near, in keeping with what Isaiah had said about him. But where is the kingdom of peace? Because even though the child was born, and even though he did all that he said he did, I'm more inclined these days to think about the later verse of that song we started with. And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Because the reality is that even though the child has come, even though the promised one has been here, the kingdom that Isaiah prophesied doesn't seem to be here. There doesn't seem to be anyone sitting on David's throne ruling. There doesn't seem to be a kingdom of peace that is never ending. Think about kingdoms for a minute. And we don't really have a lot of kingdoms around anymore. We have this other thing we call countries, but they kind of serve the same purpose. And if I can oversimplify here and make some generalizations just for a minute, I want to suggest that a kingdom really serves two purposes. A kingdom serves the first purpose of providing for the people. And a second purpose is protecting the people.